So my name is Dan Mitzner. For those who don't know me, I'm the Director of State Political Affairs for Teach NYS. I'm joined by my colleagues, Ami Bazov at Agudath, Israel, and Sarah Seligson from the Jewish Education Project. We are really excited to be here with you all today. I know everyone is very concerned and has many questions about the EANS program, which is the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools program. If you are on this call, you are aware of the top level 30,000-foot view of what this program does, which basically provides non-public schools with reimbursement and services for COVID-related expenses. What we wanted to do today, and we assume that if you're on this call right now, is you're here because you have submitted your letter of intent to participate in the program, and you are at the stage. And excuse me, I also wanted to add, my apologies, another colleague of ours, Yoshua Pincus from Agudath Israel as well, who is joining us from the road. Thank you, Yoshua, for being with us today. What we wanted to do was to just provide you with some assistance on the application that you are working on to submit, which is due back in a week's time, on April 30th. So just very briefly, what I wanted to do, and I'm also going to invite Sarah and Ami and Yoshua to jump in if I missed anything. This is a fluid conversation here, but just very briefly, I'm going to put up the application for you. I'm going to share my screen if I could get this to work. Just bear with me for a second here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so you'll see on your screen the application that you all should have seen at this point. It has all the basic information about your institution here, your beds number, etc. What I wanted to point out to you, first of all, is that number one, your completed applications need to be submitted, mailed and postmarked by April 30th to Capital Region BOCES, okay? We are encouraging you all to submit it by mail, but also submit it with copies. Do not just send your only copy because things do get lost in the mail. You should absolutely submit it, but make copies first of everything that you are submitting. You should also, when you do mail it in, get it certified with the tracking number so that you can keep track of your application. That's very important. We would hate for all of your good work to have gone to waste because it got lost in the mail. That's just a very basic point. So what I wanted to also point your attention to is the different options that you have for submitting your application, okay? Option one, you'll see here, my school wants to claim only items that have been already purchased and will be reimbursed, okay? Somebody's doodling on the page, that's okay. So that basically means this is for items going back to March 13th, 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, COVID-related expenses, and there's a whole list of approved expenses, which I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to actually paste into the chat if we can, so that people can see what those allowable uses are. So that's basically option one. That's for, sorry for a moment, that's for expenses going back to the beginning of the pandemic. Option two is a hybrid, right? My school wants to claim items that have been already purchased and submit for future services and or assistance. That is, like I said, it's a hybrid. So that's for things going, reimbursements going back to the beginning of the pandemic, and also for services and goods that you still do need. For reimbursements for future expenses, you'll notice here in the last bullet, you have until July 15th, 2021 to submit additional documentation to support future expenses. So let's give you an example. Let's say you have education technology, iPads and Chromebooks that you have already purchased back in last spring. You're going to submit for those, but also you can submit up until July 15th for new iPads and Chromebooks that you have not yet purchased with additional documentation. And that has to be, the additional documentation has to be submitted by July 15th. But you should not wait till July 15th to put in your itemized list of what you would like. You should be submitting that all at one shot right now. And then option 3, my school wants to only request future services and or assistance. So this, let's say you haven't yet bought, which I find hard to believe, but who knows, you haven't yet purchased anything that is a part of the allowable uses for this program, and you would like to submit only for future expenses. You only have to complete Part F, Table 2, and put in both for your reimbursements and for services. So I want to pause there. I want to see if my colleagues Sarah or Ami or Yoshua wanted to add anything or clarify anything that I just said.
No, I think we're good, and we'll get to the questions pretty soon, and things will be even more clear then.
For sure. So yeah, I mean, I think if there are no overall points, Ami or Yoshua, that you wanted to add, any tips or pointers that you wanted to provide the group, I think we could really just jump right into the question and answer, because I know there are many questions that people have. So
right, I think you did a pretty good introduction, and I think we could jump right into the questions.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to turn it over to the chat, and I'm going to read out the questions that are being submitted. If you do have questions, please type them up. It's for efficiency and to make sure that we don't miss anything. We're just going to go through them on the chat and read them aloud. So somebody sent, please clarify as soon as possible interaction between EANS and PPP round 2. Who wants to take this one?
Sure, I'll be happy to start. So if a school accepts the second round of EANS, PPP2, you cannot also accept EANS. It's one or the other. So this is the moment where if your school had applied both for PPP and for EANS, you're making that choice. If you've already accepted PPP, you cannot accept EANS. If you have not accepted the PPP yet, you can look at both of your allocations, what you would get from PPP and what you would get from EANS, and make a decision. I would just say that PPP is more fluid cash than EANS. So that is something to consider. If your numbers are close, you might be better off with the PPP.
I would just add in regarding that. So there's some confusion regarding if you got the first PPP after December 27th. So in other words, the language in law says after December 27th, you can't get both the PPP and the EANS, but
I did get an answer, unfortunately. I did get an answer on that yesterday, late yesterday, from State Ed. And at the moment, the answer is the date is what was written. And right. So even if it's PPP 1 that you received after December 27th, you would not be eligible for EANS. But we will continue looking into that to see if we can get that changed, because our understanding is that it was specifically tied to PPP 2, but clarification is needed since the date was put in the statute or guidance.
Thank you for that. So I'm just going to add on to that as well. We spoke to Christina Coughlin. She said a good approach would be to look at the intent of the legislative intent. So I guess, again, like Sarah mentioned, we'll look into it. It doesn't look like it's good, but we'll definitely advocate and try to make it only count the second PPP and not the original one. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, the next question I have here from Eliza Klein: how itemized does it have to be for future purchases? We don't have exact prices on some new items yet.
If you're talking about purchases, I don't think it needs to be detailed. You have categories. We didn't look at that very specifically. Dan, I don't know if you want to share your screen again and scroll down a little bit lower in the application. There are categories that you need to check off. So if you're talking about purchasing for the future, you would be filling out the second table, and you would just indicate the general. You don't necessarily have to have specific costs for anything. It's an estimation, and once you actually have your receipts, that's what you will get reimbursed. You just have to submit everything by July 15th.
Right, so here, if you see on the application, there's different categories, and you just put in your total cost, but as Sarah said, an estimate is fine. And then as you get your receipts and invoices, it'll become much clearer.
Right. I just want to add that Christina said that there's going to be a second form submitted for those reimbursements before July 15th.
Okay, so let me see, where were we? It was Lisa. Okay. Lots of questions, which is good. Okay. Does Zoom count as ed tech purchases? What about Rosetta Stone for ESL? Yes, they're being quite liberal with what counts as ed tech. So really, it's just the general, expenses as it relates to ed tech, including software counts. So and licenses. So Zoom will count. Rosetta Stone should count as well. Why isn't leased additional space included on the reimbursement list?
It is.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to
Right,
say.
I was just looking at the list just to double check. I believe it is. I'm going to double check just to see what this question is referring to. But right, my memory serves me correct as well. It is. Dan, could you pull it up very quickly?
I think the confusion might be that if you are submitting for future, both the items that you can get reimbursement for and the items that you would have to request services under contract for are contained in that one second table. So you'll notice that there are several items that have asterisks next to them. Those with an asterisk are the items that must be provided through a contract with New York State.
Right,
so
but
all the rest of the items in that table, in the second table, are for reimbursement.
right, if you're
including leasing.
right, exactly. So if you're looking at part E of the application, it clearly says leasing sites or spaces to ensure social distancing. Okay, what does reasonable transportation costs mean?
Okay, so I'll take this one. This is from my understanding from talking to Christina. This means A, that it can't be during the time when schools have to be closed. B, it has to be reasonable just price-wise, or you can't, the funds actually have to be reasonable. Furthermore, they're not going to cover, if you decide to buy a new school bus, they're not going to cover that. They will cover, something reasonable where we had to add an extra route because we wanted to social distance, or something along those lines, something reasonable that makes sense. They will approve that. If it's something sort of out there, you started busing in kids from, I don't know, from Florida for fun, whatever it is, it's not going to be covered.
Thanks, Ami. Okay, for future expenses, do we need to actually have payment proof for supplies or service? So the answer is yes, you will need to submit that by July 15th, though. You don't need to submit that right now.
But service, I'm not
service.
sure what the questioner meant by service, but most items that are service are not reimbursable. Service needs to be under contract. Reimbursement is for items, including things like software that you might not think of as an item per se. But that's, yes, you must have both the invoice and the proof of payment. They've been very clear about that.
Right. Okay, next question. Can this be used for purchases for outdoor facilities such as bigger playgrounds or a yard to allow for more students outdoors due to COVID?
If you leased it and you have a lease agreement, I would say yes.
Exactly. It's not for the purchase of property, but certainly for leasing new space, definitely it explicitly allows for that.
I'm looking at the question, outdoor facilities, do they mean we already own the space, but we're just adding in, an extra, playground within the space we have, like extra monkey bars or whatever it is? I think that's maybe what the question is referring to. And
if it's supplies like that, then it's a no, because those are permanent structures that you would have placed on the property, and anything that's permanent is not reimbursable.
So again, so if it's a lease, if it's a rental, extra space, that should be reimbursable because it is COVID related. If it's a capital, basically anything, a capital expense that you're fixing something up, it's something, then it won't be covered, right? Did I get that right, Sarah? All right.
Correct. Okay, another question from Elisa. Is the invoice letter in Part E, Table 1, something we just assign? Can the table of contents be a separate sheet? And do we need to include a description of each purchase? Okay, so maybe it'd be helpful for me to pull up the application one more time. Invoice letter in Part E. Bear with me a second here.
While Dan pulls it up, I'll start to answer. I believe it is just your invoice. There is a table above.
Sorry, which was the?
So I think it was Part E is the table.
Mm-hmm.
In E, you have two tables. Table 1 is for people who are just providing reimbursement for past expenses.
Right.
So if you select option 1, then you complete this table. If you select option 2, you complete table 1 and table 2. Table 1 would be for expenses that you've already made that you're going to have reimbursement for, and table 2 is for future expenses and or services that you are requesting. I think if you scroll back up higher.
Yeah, it's all the way on top of the table of contents.
That table, this table right here, this is what you're going to complete to go along with your table 1 reimbursements, to show exactly what it is that you purchased. So you're not actually inserting an invoice into Part E. You're inserting the letter corresponding to the row of the detail that you provided.
Right. And to clarify, you could use a separate sheet. I don't see why you can't use a separate sheet for this.
It actually says that you could make an attachment, or you could just add rows.
Yeah.
Right.
Whatever is easier, essentially.
Okay. Where were we here? Sorry, I'm just scrolling back up to the questions. Okay, I see here. Okay, and as far as ventilation improvements, will we be able to select a vendor from an approved list, sort of like the federal and state security grants, or will the state assign us a vendor and we will have to use that vendor?
It's a tough one. Where we are now is there are no approved vendors. The state is looking at several possible ways that they can get a vendor to do this quickly. We all need to kind of keep in mind, as painful as it is, this is the fastest we have ever seen a federal program roll out from beginning to end. If you've ever dealt with contracts and government agencies, you know that just to get a contract could literally take years. So they're trying to come up with a way that they can sort of piggyback on existing contracts and extend that contract to be able to fulfill the obligations that within EANS. It's not a simple process at all. Unfortunately, it's not like any one of us just hiring a contractor to fix our home or fix our school building. There are a lot of nitty-gritty rules attached to government contracts. So there may be a longer list that you can pick from, or there may be literally just one contracted organization. Now, it could also be that that contracted organization will subcontract. And then if you have a contractor that you're happy with, you might be able to recommend your contractor to this organization or the entity that won the contract from the state. But we just don't have 100% clarity on that yet. We are working through this as we are implementing this program. But that was an excellent question.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. On the spreadsheet, it said that we have an allocation of $0 per student. However, in an email we got from you, I'm not sure which one of us, probably could be me, we got from you states that we were entitled to $53,000. What's the correct amount? So I'll just take this one. Unfortunately, the Excel sheet that they had shared, that the state had shared with us and with everyone, is a little bit confusing because it looks at the formula, the way that they calculated what your EANS allocation is, and split it up into different categories. So many people, many schools got a $0 amount for their COVID impact number, which is confusing because, first of all, we've all been impacted by COVID, right? So how did that happen? But that aside, the relevant number that you should really be looking at is the first column, which is highlighted in green, which states your total EANS allocation. And Shalemi, I'm happy if you want to email me separately, I could show you and walk you through what that is. But basically, that's the total number that you got. The other columns after break down how they got to that total amount. So I'm imagining that your school got a $53,000 allocation in that green column, and then it's broken down further based on enrollment, based on your low income student count, and then you probably had a $0 amount in your COVID impact, if I'm guessing. So you should not be confused by that, and really just pay attention to the green number at this stage. Okay. Next, are graduation expenses from last year to be included under EANS, and under which category would I put it?
So I'll take this one. The question is kind of vague. We're assuming you mean, this is probably Yaakov Tzvi, how are Yaakov Tzvi? We're assuming you mean you rented out extra space, or you might have had some type of Zoom component. You might have maybe got bigger speakers, extra tables. Assuming you put extra than what you usually would have done for your graduation, that should all be covered. Under which part? Well, assuming you rented out extra space, it would fall under that category in the, where it says leasing sites or spaces to ensure social distancing. That is in table for the reimbursement. That will be in first table. And again, depending on what exactly it is, it might go under the technology. If you had to get louder different loudspeakers, or have a camera set up. So you'd have to look through and see which it would fit best in. Again, it's not a perfect science. In other words, if it would have fallen better into a different category, I don't think they're gonna say, well, you should have put it in A or B. As long as it's similar enough, I doubt they're going to just not give you your funds. Do your best. So for their sake, it should be, more simple for them to figure out what's going on. But for the most part, our understanding is graduation expenses should be covered.
Absolutely. And, a lot of it also looks at, people were talking about getting tents and things of that nature. Those are all allowable. You just have to put them in for, to help with social distancing, that category, for example. Or if you had to lease a little bit more space, you can put that in, etc. So yeah, just use your best judgment to try and make it fit the existing categories. Okay, next question. Did Schumer say that you could take PPP and deduct that amount from EANS? I wasn't on the call, so Ami, why don't you take it away?
So what Schumer said, this is something after he said it, we were also, sort of trying to figure out exactly what he meant. But essentially our understanding is, and again, we're following up with his office, of course, is he said something along the lines of, what you could do is you could apply for the PPP, and then when the full EANS amount, and really it's not so clear if he was referring to EANS 1 or EANS 2, I'm going to try to leave EANS 2 out of it, but let's assume we're going to put those two numbers together. He said that, my understanding of it at least is, if it ends up that the PPP amount, I'm sorry, if the EANS amount is bigger than what you got in PPP, you could take that funding from the EANS, pay back your PPP, and then use the leftover EANS for whatever you want. That's what he said. Again, he said he's working on it. So for now, just put it on the sideline. Don't think about it. If it works out, we'll be more than happy to share that news. But that's really, it's hard to fit into the language. I'm not, but he is Senator Schumer, so he could get it going, I guess, if he wants to. Sarah, I see you have something to add.
Well, I'm just thinking, I think we also have to keep in mind that sometimes our legislators say something because they think they understand the details of a particular bill and they don't quite get it right because their aide is not whispering in their ear at that moment. That it does not jive with what we know as far as what the legislation says, but hey,
Let's hope for the best.
he is Senator Schumer, as we've said.
And now I want to commend my colleagues at Agudath Israel because they got Senator Schumer on the record saying something, and therefore that's it. It's done. So well done. We'll see how that turns out. We'll see how that turns out. I would imagine it has something to do with EANS too, if I'm a betting man. But let's see how it rolls out. Okay. Next question. Why doesn't our student count in the spreadsheet match the student count that we reported from beds in our letter of intent? That's an interesting.
You may have used, it is possible, you may have used the wrong year. The beds count was specific to was it last year or the year before? Somebody help me.
It was 18-19.
It was 18-19. So we are now in 2021. That's a gap of a year there. So they may have, you may have put in last year's beds number and they went back and double checked and pulled the correct number from 18-19. But if you really think that it's wrong, then you should contact the SORAS office.
Right. Or, before even contacting SORAS, reach out to any one of us.
And we can look it up.
We'll double check and see exactly what the issue might be, and then if we can't figure it out, or if you have a solid claim, of course, then you could reach out to SORAS.
Great. Okay, next question. How do I categorize these types of purchases in Part E? 1, we purchased many supplies so that students could stay 6 feet distanced, separate materials, etc., so that they don't share. So let's take that one first. It really, I guess, depends
CDC.
More.
Put it under, I would say, put it under the CDC component.
For social distancing.
Right.
Right. Okay. The next one is soap and hand sanitizer. That's cleaning supplies. And then 3 is signage about public health policies and to keep people distanced.
CDC.
I think that, yeah, I was about to say, I think that's also the CDC, social distancing reimbursements. Okay, next, as far as future purchases, do we put in the orders now and then eventually get reimbursed, or the work needs to be done by then? As far as
okay, no.
Okay.
This is materials. It's not work. It's materials. So
Right.
For materials, remember there are 2 categories. Either materials that you've already purchased and you already have proof of, the invoice and proof of payment. That goes into Part E, Table 1. Part E, Table 2, you can include future purchases that you will make before July 15th, you have to have, it has to, I'm going to say be postmarked, because they did that. That's what they did for April 30th. So I'm going to say it has to be postmarked to Capital BOCES by July 15th. By July 15th, you have to have in the envelope the invoice and proof of payment. It's not that you cleaned your school a gazillion times and used up all of the cleaning supplies.
Right.
You have to purchase. If you want to use those funds now to purchase all of your cleaning supplies for next school year, let's say, go ahead, do it.
Right. And for services, if that's what you're referring to or asking about, you have to, on this application, put in what you would like services for, understanding that there aren't any contracts yet with service providers. So it's more of this is a wish list of things that I want. And soon you will know and be contacted by the state about what providers you can and cannot use. So just sort of put together a list of your services that you'd like.
Just to add in regarding cleaning services, I do believe that the federal government did come out with some guidance regarding cleaning services, that they do have their doubts whether they could be covered or not, even through a vendor. Just throwing it out there. I didn't look too deeply into it, but there is a question regarding it. Hopefully we'll be able to share more information once that's clarified.
Great. Okay. If we accepted PPP round 2 because we didn't know what our allocation for EANS would be so much more, is there any way to pull back or return the PPP funds?
The answer to the first part, in other words, to pull back the funds, my understanding is yes, as long as you didn't actually accept the funds yet, you could not accept them and then use the EANS. That's my understanding. If you already had the funds and return them, I don't know, Sarah or Dan, if you guys know.
I'd have to go back in my email, but I'm pretty sure we asked this question and the answer was yes, but it depends on, I'm not an expert in the PPP, so I don't know how the banks work this. If you can actually return the PPP loan, then theoretically you would be able to accept the EANS. I believe I have that in writing.
Right. Whether or not you should do that, though, is a whole other question, because the PPP gives you a lot more flexibility on how to use this funding. And so you should really consider that, even if your EANS allocation is higher than your PPP round 2, it may still be worth your while to stick with PPP and use it for things like payroll, etc. So that's just a thought.
Just remember, it's cash versus very specific reimbursements and services, and the services are very unclear right now because we do not have any contracts yet.
Right.
There will be a year though. Do keep in mind, I don't mean to get everybody nervous like you're actually going to get nothing out of this. We have the whole next year to spend this money down within those contracts, not for the reimbursements. The reimbursements are one and done, well, two and done, April 30th and then again July 15th, but then they're done. But the services will be able to be implemented over the entire next school year.
And just to add in again, for the specific questioner, reach out to any one of us. I'm sure we'll be happy to just sit down, go through sort of the numbers with you and see what makes sense, because I think we're all in agreement if you could get the PPP, assuming that the difference is not so vast that, that's a whole different discussion. We usually, again, this will be an individual discussion, but generally the PPP is probably, most schools would prefer that. But again, call any one of us. We'll be happy to sit down with you and discuss the details.
Absolutely. Okay. Next, can we order new smart boards now and submit for EANS as long as we pay for it by July 15th? And does tech installing costs also get covered? So the first part of your, sure, go ahead, Sarah.
Do you have the answer?
On the tech installing, I don't, but on the first part I do, but go ahead.
No, I'm curious to hear what you're going to say, because I had a conversation with Christina. So you go ahead first.
No,
you're putting him on the spot, Sarah.
Then go for it.
All right, fine. I had a conversation with Christina. I don't have a firm answer yet. Her question back to me was, how is this related to COVID? You think of a smart board that's in the classroom. Why did you need it for COVID? Everything, even all of the technology has to be related to COVID. I wrote back to her saying that the new smart boards allow for interaction, especially in a hybrid situation, that the students that may be in the classroom and the students that may be remote have the opportunity to see the same material at the same time and can even interact with each other. However, if your school doesn't use internet and that, they can see that your school doesn't use internet somehow, some way. I'm not talking about how deeply they might investigate, do an audit on any of this, but you are subject to audit on all of this. So that's the explanation that I believe would satisfy for purchasing of smart boards. If somebody has a better answer, please let us know. But the installation is not covered, because installation of it, that's the issue of permanence.
Right.
Do you
Right. So
disagree,
yeah, if
Ami?
you
You're on
do,
mute. Ami, you're on mute.
Yeah, now I'm just looking at the language and I'm wondering, and again, this is something that I'm not gonna come up with any conclusion right now because not in the middle of the meeting, but I'm wondering if it could just fall into a learning loss category generally. In other words, if you can make the argument that technology allows me to teach my students better and to address the learning losses during COVID. But again, that the learning loss language happens to be somewhat complicated as it is. It's vague, and we'd have to look more into it. But
The learning
definitely-
loss,
learning loss is
remember
for
though, that
services.
learning loss is a service.
Right.
Right.
It's
Right,
not
no,
a
but it also allows for
reimbursement.
technology for hybrid, right? In other words, it does allow for that learning loss. Let me see if I can find the language, something along redeveloping instructional plans for remote or hybrid. No, not initiating
That's a service.
education and support services or assistance for remote or hybrid learning. Okay, fine. I want to look in more into. I hear what you guys are saying.
Right.
Yeah.
if anyone has any other justifications for smart boards that you could think of, anyone who's actually in the classroom, that would be very helpful for us. So please send that along. Okay. Will we be able to switch money to different categories in future expenses? For example, if we put in $50,000 for ventilation, but use only $25,000, will we be able to move over the unused funds to educational support?
We don't have a firm answer on that yet, but we believe the answer will be yes, and we will be advocating for that.
Right, and just to be clear about the ventilation piece, there's no clarity yet on whether or not, well, there is clarity rather, I should say. There is clarity on ventilation. Although it does list ventilation and windows as an allowable use, the following guidance that has come down both from the feds as well as the state says that ventilation upgrades that are permanent, that are affixed to your structures, are not an allowable use. You can only use mobile or temporary ventilation systems for reimbursement here. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at ventilation as a major cost. Okay. Do we need to provide a canceled check as proof of payment for each expense that we're applying for reimbursement for? Either a canceled check or a credit card or debit card statement will do.
Right. We spoke. Our understanding is they more or less copied the NPSC system of reimbursement for this. So that's, from what I hear from schools, that's usually a very easy program to navigate. It's relative to other programs. So you shouldn't have a very hard time. Just, they're not going to give you a hard time with your proofs of purchase. Again, like Dan said, just a canceled check or proof of purchase from your credit card statement would suffice.
The
Right.
point simply is that an invoice that says paid on it is not enough.
Correct. That does mean that your packets that you're submitting are going to be considerably larger, but that's the nature of the beast here. Anyway, next question. The one that was posted, oh, I don't know what that means. The one that was posted in the chat. Okay. Maybe we'll get to it later. Okay, next, can we include installation costs and permit costs related to installing modular classrooms in addition to just the cost of the modulars? So as we answered before, unfortunately, no, because that would, that goes, unless I'm wrong here, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but that goes to the permanence of fixing structures and capital costs. So you cannot include the installation costs, but you can for the actual services or the product itself.
I don't, I'm just gonna throw in what they, I guess it really depends. What do you mean by modular classrooms? What exactly are you adding? Are you just adding in partitions? And I would say then maybe the installation would count for it, because I don't think that's capital.
I don't know, because I don't think, you know, the installation of a smart board is not allowable because it makes it
Right.
permanent. So
Right, no,
I'm
but
not
over
sure
here,
that
but I-
installation is like that step that makes something that could be movable into something that's more permanent. And then you have to undo it from the school's structure in order to give it back, which is the letter of the law.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. Like, for example, I saw one school that they had the partitions hanging from the ceiling rafters, and it was more of like a clip. So I'm not sure if the person that put that in charged for installation, but it's literally just unclip it. So that's what I'm saying. It probably, if it's an installation that's going to be for long term, it's not going to help. But really depends on what you define as installation. Probably, maybe it would just fall under delivery. I mean, it's hard to say exactly. Again, for more, I think for almost any one of these questions, if you're referring to your specific situation, after this call is done, explain it. I'm sorry about that noise.
I would just be careful about anything that says installation. Understand that there's a possibility it might not be accepted, but they're going to review all of this and reach out to you with questions that they have as well during their review of your application.
Right. So here's a really interesting question. Can HVAC upgrades, repairs, and or maintenance be covered in one of the categories? So HVAC upgrades cannot, but Sarah or Ami, I don't know if you have the answer here, but maintenance or repairs, I understand that, for example, repairs to windows are allowable. So I would wonder or question whether HVAC repairs and maintenance are allowable uses.
I would imagine that repair and maintenance might be allowable. However, it is a service. So right. We, not just you, we, all of us, we're going to have to wait until a contract is complete so that you can decide whether or not you want to use that vendor, or if there's a way for that vendor to subcontract with someone that you want to use, etc. So we will get clarity on the actual answer. I would assume that it's similar to the answer for Windows, because they were lumped together and repair was specified as an allowable cost. But if, you know, I would say you might think about if that's really where you want to put your funds.
Right. I lost my spot here, unfortunately, and there are a lot of questions.
I'll pick up the next question while you find your spot.
Please.
Sure.
Oh, I found it. Okay, go
ahead. Okay. Can we include expenses related to the rental, i.e. portable whiteboards, Wi-Fi equipment, under rental expenses for reimbursement? So the three of us were actually discussing this yesterday. We think that the answer should be yes, because what Ami, you on your call, there was something that was the answer was yes for related to rental.
So it's interesting. Rentals, off the top of my head, I don't recall that specific question, but off the top of my head, I just don't see why it wouldn't. In other words, is the question which category would it fall under? I mean, just generally, I don't see what.
What we were talking about was if you rent another space because
Right.
you need to meet the requirements for social distancing. Well, now you have a new space that you need to fill with things for your students.
No, right. So that is from what Christina told us, that should be covered, right? She said that she
Right.
understood that should be covered. I understood it. So okay, maybe I misunderstood.
It's related to rental.
Related to the rental, yes. So the answer
Yes.
to that, based on what Christina said, is yes, essentially. Yeah, you're right, Sarah. Correct. I misunderstood the question to mean we're renting whiteboards and
no.
Wi-Fi equipment, which in theory would also be covered. I don't see why not, but that's how I misunderstood this question. Yeah, go on.
Okay.
Reasonable transportation costs, right? Is that what we're up to?
Yes.
Reasonable transportation costs would be for summer months only. The school district's fund cover most of our operations during the school year.
So again, I don't think it would only be for something. Maybe on a practical level, it would probably maybe only cover your summer months if you had school over the summer and you were bringing your kids in for summer school. I'm not sure what that setup would be, but in theory, it could also cover other things. If it might cover the transportation costs for what the district didn't cover, an extra bus, or I mean, again, I can't think of that many scenarios, to be honest, for transportation costs if your busing is being covered by the district. But reach out to us. I don't know if we'll cover trips though. I don't. That's a good question. Maybe if you make it a COVID argument, we had to.
What was
It
open?
was an educational trip, let's say.
What
And,
was open?
What? Nothing's open.
What
Right?
was
No,
open
I mean,
for trips?
later on it was open. So I don't know. It's sort of iffy, but in theory, if 1 second, please.
Well, what about this? If you wanted extra more buses or something like that for the following year, to spread out your kids even more, beyond what the district covers, perhaps that could be covered by this.
Yeah, this was actually addressed by Christina directly, and she said, like, we're not going to cover all your busing, but if you have an extra route or an extra bus because you want to have more social distancing, that definitely would be eligible.
Right. Exactly. Okay. What about items that staff members purchased, i.e. have receipts from retail store and the school reimbursed them for?
As long as it fits the categories that are allowable for reimbursement, then if you have a paper trail that shows that the school paid for it, I would say yes.
Is GoGuardian and Google licenses included under tech? And if yes, since an agreement per year or more, if we have an agreement for a few years, can it all be covered under EANS? The answer is, my understanding is yes. You have, first of all, in terms of the licenses, I believe definitely those would count. And I don't see really much of a difference between this and buying several years worth of cleaning supplies down the line if you needed to, right? I don't know, Sarah, what's your interpretation?
Yeah, so my take on that actually is that, you know, where cleaning supplies are reimbursed and whatever it is that you purchased, they will reimburse for this. If this is a contract that clearly delineates a price per year, I don't know that they would pay for it prior to March, what was it, 12th, 2020, 13th,
yeah,
2020, and through next school year.
Well, they certainly won't for anything before March 13th.
Right.
That's for sure.
Right, but I think they would only pay for it through these funds could only pay for it through next year.
Right, so the drop dead date for EANS in general is
June 30th.
Right, June 30th, 2023, 2022.
2022.
Right.
So if it's like, you know, if you signed this contract in 2020 and it goes to 2023, it might only cover through June 30th of 2020.
Right. Okay. Where are we here? What about hands-free faucets and soap dispensers?
they should be fine. CDC guidance. Yeah, I think that's actually the best best examples of what should most easily be covered. Yeah, you should be okay.
Yeah.
Well, the faucets might be a capital.
Oh, it's
Right.
a capital
Oh,
expense.
oh.
Yeah.
Right,
Well,
that's what I
right.
was gonna say. It's a permanent fixture.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean the hands-free. I don't know how it works. Is it? Okay, I don't-
Faucets are fixed.
No, I know,
But
but
the
is
soap
it just adding?
dispensers, if the
is it-
soap dispenser sits on the top of, you might be able to get payment for the actual item. I don't know. It's a good one.
Right,
good
right.
one.
That's what I was thinking. In other words, if you have what does that mean? Is the faucet just a faucet with a sensor on it?
Yeah.
And then, so it's a good question, I guess. I
We
thought it
can
was
tr-
pretty
we
simple.
can,
but
we
yeah.
can advocate for it, but it could go either way because it's a fixed.
Right. I mean,
this
maybe
stage,
this
if
could be
you-
this. I'm sorry, I'm just saying this might be a good case where we could really get sort of expand that fixed concept and show that it's not a perfect rule and they really should expand it. Not just this, but for other things that might be fixed, but are obviously very much COVID related.
Right, what
Yeah, but I
I
think
would
they
advise
would-
is,
I think what they would do is cover, if they agreed, they would cover the actual cost of the item, but again, not the installation.
right, what I would suggest is if you are at a point where you're looking for things, right, your EANS allocation is not, you haven't maxed it out yet, I would still include it and we'll see what happens.
Right.
Okay, I understand that cleaning supplies, etc., is covered and we can make an order to stack up on. Yes,
Yes.
that is correct. I have a private message here. For future expenses, till when could we expense the money? That's till July 15th. So you have to submit and by July 15th, and you can postmark it to that date. Okay, if the lease expense is more than enough to cover allocation, should we oversubmit for the other categories just in case for some reason the lease space isn't approved?
You won't be able to. If you're going to submit the lease expense, and let's say you have $50,000 and your lease was for $100,000 and you submit your $100,000 lease expense, you're not going to be able to submit for anything else. I think once you hit your ceiling,
That submission is done. But I would add, I mean, it sounds like the questioner is worried maybe they won't cover it. Then what? So we already said that there would be a fallback option, which what we're advocating, in that if something that you set aside for does not get approved, that money will automatically be moved to a different category, probably for the services. But in this case, another way of doing it may be just again, from our experience, at least my experience with the NICED and the office over there, if you just add in a letter saying, by the way, for whatever reason this doesn't work, here's a whole other list of expenses that might be covered, they'll probably take that into account. Like they won't just throw the whole thing out in the garbage. So if you're really worried about that, you could definitely add an extra letter with those extra expenses, explaining why you're adding that in, and hope for the best.
I would agree. I would
Yep.
agree with that. That's good best practice. What about expenses occurring after July? I guess they're saying accruing.
yeah, expenses have to be all reimbursements. Since this program was supposed to end, if you will, everything needs to be encumbered by August 23rd. That is why all of the expenses have to be in by July 15th, so that there's time for the state to review it and submit payment to the school by August 23rd. So there are no allowances to purchase additional items after July.
But to
Only
clarify,
services.
right? Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, go on with that. I just want to
Because
make
the
sure.
services will be under contract, and the state, when they assign the contracts, will use all of the information provided by all the schools about what it is that they want to assign a dollar amount to that contract. That's considered encumbering. And then they have until next June 30th to disperse the funds. But with purchases, the encumbrance can't come later. It's done. It's done on August 23rd, and needs to be paid out.
right? Okay, what can we use the EANS allocation for under the other expenses category?
From what Christina told me, I'm sorry, Sarah, you can follow up,
No,
but
go ahead.
from our understanding is, if anything you feel is reasonable, would be reasonably covered by EANS, it's COVID related, but for some reason it doesn't neatly fit into any of the categories, put it in other, and it would automatically go into like that review category. They're going to review it and see if they could somehow fit it in, finagle it into one of the existing categories. So that's what really other is used for. If you have an expense, you feel it should be covered, it doesn't neatly fit into any other categories already existent, but it makes sense that it should be somehow covered, put it in, and then it'll go through a review process. What do you think, Sarah?
Yep.
You want, okay.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a very vague,
Catch-all.
there's no detail, there's no explanation for it, and it explicitly says it will be reviewed.
Yeah, I'm sure you're all very creative and could find some things that aren't in any of the explicit categories. Okay. There seems to be no mention of services in Part E, Table 1 reimbursements. If we hire outside guards and we created an outdoor classroom in the streets, can we ask reimbursement for it?
Unfortunately not. That is a salary expense. Salaries may not be covered.
Under reimbursement.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ami.
Payroll, basically. Any of your own personal payroll cannot be covered.
Yeah,
Right.
so,
And
even if it was through a third party, it doesn't
Exactly.
count because it's the contract. In this particular case, the contract must be held by New York State. So, if it had been an allowable expense that we were planning for a year ahead of time, and the state, put a contract into place for additional security guards, that would have been one thing. But, there was no prep time on this one, obviously. So
Right.
Table 1 is only for reimbursable expenses, no services. So only for the items that you're allowed to submit for reimbursable expenses, if all of those expenses have already been made. All of those purchases have already been made. The minute you intend to also spend before July 15th, purchase something before July 15th, you would have to complete Table 2.
Right. Think of Table 1 as reimbursements for goods as opposed to anything else. It's for tangible items instead of services. Okay, I see covering expenses for services after July 15th. Not sure what that means.
No, expenses after, services after July 15th, services are going to be under contract. No expenses after July 15th. Services after July 15th will be under contract by New York State for those very limited categories. You will see them in Part E, Table 2 with an asterisk, and those are the only services. And to date, there are no contracts. We anticipate, we hope there will be contracts this summer, and you will be able to, whatever funds you put into any one of those categories, you will be able to make use of those contracts through next school year.
Right. Do we want to give some examples of what those services might be? Learning loss, for example. And
so any after school program you might want to run, tutoring. Think about those of you who have Title I in your school, think about what those services look like, and might you want to offer some of those kinds of services to students who are not eligible for Title I. So tutoring, counseling, mental health support, small group instructional support,
curriculum.
Curriculum building is another category, is redesigning your instruction. So, redoing your curriculum, analyzing student data, those kinds of support services. So it's kind of like support services for your teachers to better teach your students and direct support for your students,
Right.
all from a third party.
Right. Approved by the state through a state contract, which we don't have yet. Okay. Is iService an eligible item? Will it have to be contracted item through the state? I'm not sure what that is.
I don't know what that is, so
I'm not, yeah. If it is, let me just, we're not sure what iService is, but Rabbi Fisher, if it is a service, again, anything that somebody's actually gonna come and do something, right? And again, I'm not sure what iService is, but it has the word service in there. But
Maybe
if it's
internet service or something?
I don't know, because then why would we have to, okay, he'll reach out to us or maybe he'll clarify later, but the idea is if it's an actual service, somebody working for you with some type of payroll, paycheck, something like that, then it would have to be contracted through the state. You would not be able to do it you wouldn't be able to pay them on your own.
Right. Okay. We've already hit the hour mark, and we do have plenty of questions left. What time do we want to go till? I mean, I'm still good to go for a little while if you're opposed.
I can stay on for another half an hour. And
Okay.
again, for everybody that's joining us, we will do our very best to put this into an FAQ document and share out the answers. It will probably not be out before Monday at 5 p.m., I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Not before.
Right. All right, let's do our best to get through as many as we can. Can transportation costs include payments to staff so that they don't have to take public transportation, Uber or garage stipend? The answer is no, because any payments to staff does not work. That's my understanding.
Right, yeah, if it's a payment to staff, it's a funny, I mean, I guess it would depend how
Right,
you
if the
structured it.
school paid Uber,
If the school paid Uber directly, then maybe, but if it's paying staff,
I mean,
yeah.
again, it's actually a funny question. Again, even paying staff, if you structured it under transportation expense, I'm not, this probably.
we can try to get clarity on this.
Right, Dan, I have a feeling Dan's initial reaction is probably right if it's going, check to the employee, but let's double check. And again, it could get complicated so far as how you structure that. So,
yeah.
You would definitely have to show the paper trail, the original invoice and the original payment, and then the payment from the school back to the person who actually paid it to show that the school paid for this transportation.
Right. Okay. Is IT or phone service allowable? Will it have to be a contracted service with the state?
I don't think it is.
you don't think it's
For students' internet, maybe for,
right? That's what they're referring to. In other words, I had to now get better phone service or better, internet
oh,
service.
right, I forgot, a lot of our,
for
a lot
COVID.
of our schools did phone classes.
Right.
It could be I guess, then it could be.
Yeah.
For the limited period of time.
Right. For me, it feels the same as any kind of license for technology.
Right.
So yeah, I think I would submit it for that,
Yeah.
again, the allowable time.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, okay. Getting tutors to help kids get up to par on lost education over the next few months. How do we enter this? And can we hire individuals on payroll, or must it be a different vendor? So you would file this under the services, I think it's, what is it, table F?
E2.
E2, okay, under E2, and you would just put in a ballpark number of how much you think it will run you, and a description of what type of service a description of the service itself, and then first of all, it does have to be an outside vendor, which we do not have clarity on who those vendors will be at this time, but I would submit it as a ballpark and a description of what you're looking for, and then as time goes on, we'll get more information from the state as to which vendors you can use.
I know that there are many schools who would like to do this over the summer months. I don't know how to say this kindly. Don't hold your breath for the summer. It's really, really, really a hard push to even get these contracts by August 23rd. So we're doing our best to help the state move this forward as quickly as possible, but this is a very heavy lift. So not clear that those contracts will be available for the summer.
Here's another question. Starts off dumb question, no such thing. But I misunderstood the quote unquote invoice letter piece and used an internal reference number. It would take a huge effort to renumber everything and change them to letter. Are they going to care about letter versus numbers if it's all really typed out? I don't think they're going to have an issue.
Yeah.
As long as it's clear and there won't be any confusion, I don't think they'll make a big deal letter versus number yet.
Exactly. Okay. How can we get proof of payment for future expenses? Well, when you do get them by July 15th, that's when you would submit them.
Right. In other words, just to clarify, maybe the confusion aspect of it, again, there's essentially three portions to this, my understanding, and you guys could correct me if I'm wrong. There's prior expenses. There are expenses that you're going to get reimbursed for. There's going to be expenses you're going to get reimbursed for in the future. That's up to July 15th. And then there's the services beyond July 15th that you could get. So regarding proof of payment for future expenses up to July 15th, right now, all you're putting into application is, this is how much I'm expecting to use on the reimbursement part up to July 15th. And then once you actually spend that money, you're going to send in those receipts and you'll get that reimbursed. So just want to sort of go through that process. I'm sorry. Yeah, let's go on.
Question here. I never received or used or applied for Title I funds. Can I still receive the amount that is based on low income count?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, assuming you filled it in properly, it could also be based on your lunch. It could be based on your whatever other paperwork. You have to look at the original LOI instructions, if you will. But if you have amount set aside,
you would have gotten it, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
If you got an allocation for low income, that means, I hope, that you follow the instructions and you have some documentation on hand in the school to identify, would you be audited, that these children are living below the poverty line. So
Right.
You did a survey, these are kids on scholarship and you already had their parents' income. You
Free
have the
reduced
data.
lunch. Right. Right. How can we get proof of, oh, we already did that one. Our playground is too small for students to social distance effectively. Since we have no other playground space, we bought bikes for the students to use in the lunchroom so that they can get some physical activity and be socially distanced. We bought 18 bikes.
There's someone on an iPhone who's unmuted. Could I ask you to please mute? Thank you.
To use in the lunchroom so that they can get some physical activity and be socially distanced. We bought 18 bikes so that it would be enough for a class. Is that reimbursable? I think it should be. I think the justification is clear and it's not a fixture. So
If this sounds like a preschool, because I don't know what other bikes you could use in a lunchroom. So yeah.
They have
it's
a really big
mobile.
lunchroom. No.
What?
I said they have a really big lunchroom. No, but yeah, probably for smaller grades. And yeah, I think we're all in agreement. It should be covered.
Should be.
It sounds, yeah, makes.
maybe it's like those stationary bikes.
It's still
Concerning a spin-
movable.
Right. A spin class. I don't know.
And it was for their mental health.
Right. Right. Okay. Can we get reimbursed for bus transportation we had to pay for?
We believe so. It has to be, quote, reasonable.
Right.
But to clarify, that transportation that you paid for, again, if it was during a time where your school was closed and therefore the DOE was not giving you busing, right? And there was, and some schools, there was some confusion there, then you would not be covered for that. My understanding is.
Right.
Good reminder.
Yes. Can the allocations change, such as if other schools chose not to submit their application, or if the state realized that some schools did not list the funding that they received from the government and as a result changed the amount of their COVID impact, or if some school did not use up their funds? The answer is yes. This is an estimate, and it actually says that on the application. The EANS number will change, not not might it change, it actually definitely will, because for all the reasons that you listed. And so just use the EANS number as if it is your actual number, but there will be an adjustment for sure. Okay. This is another Schumer question, so I'm going to let you handle it.
I'm going through it, and the answer is, again, it's not really a Schumer question. I mean, he said about Schumer, but the question is really, I got the PPP, but the EANS amount is so much more. What should I do? And part of it is based on what Schumer said. And again, we don't know. I wouldn't make any actions now based on that. Let's put it that way. If it works out, great. And if not, just don't worry about it. But insofar as that specific, again, question, it could get complicated. I recommend calling any one of us. We'll sit down with you. We'll try to work it out. And at the end of the day, we're only going to be able to give you a recommendation. It's your money. It's your school. You guys have to decide what works best for you guys. But again, reach out to us.
We can help you understand the parameters,
right?
But you really need to sit either with your board or your finance team or your accountant to figure out what makes the most sense for your school.
Exactly. Every school is different.
We can't take I'm sure you all understand, none of us can take the liability of making such a decision for your school.
100%.
And again, yeah, I'm sorry, then go on.
No, I was just to kind of reiterate what I said before, just as a consideration, not don't take this to the bank, so to speak, but that's very literal actually in this case. You know, the PPP loan provides you with a lot more flexibility, and as Sarah said, it's cash in hand as opposed to reimbursements or you know, services that are very, very, very specific, which you know, through EANS. So when you are considering whether you should do PPP or EANS, remember that there's a major difference in how you can spend down this money. That's not to say that it might not still be worth it for you to do EANS, but just that, like both Anthony and Sarah said, you should take that all these factors into consideration.
That's what we're saying. Call us. We'll help you sort of take all those factors in. Like, just something that comes to mind. I don't want to spend too much time on this question specifically, but if you have bigger classrooms, which means you have, let's say, less teachers, less staff, you're gonna get less money in the PPP. But if you, so then you're gonna probably have more money because you have more students in the EANS, and then you're gonna have to work out just that money versus, but if you have, let's say, smaller classrooms with a teacher and an assistant teacher, you're gonna get more money in the PPP and less money in the EANS because you have less students. This all goes into the calculation of how you want to do it. Where do you, and another question you have to look at is, how do I foresee using the EANS funding? Right, this is what Dan is really touching up on is, okay, I have this EANS money. It looks great. It looks great. It's a nice big number. Now what? And call us. Let's try to figure out now what, and we'll see what works best.
Right. Okay. If one received PPP round 2, would that affect EANS 2? So this is from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's still unclear. We don't have a firm answer on this from the feds, so stay tuned. But really, EANS 2, there's many questions around it and how it's going to work, and it's unclear. For the time being, I think we should all be laser focused on EANS 1 and just trying to get through this application. And soon we should have an update on what happens with EANS 2. But just know that all of our organizations are submitting comments, and we're advocating aggressively on Capitol Hill to make sure that EANS 2 is as favorable as possible for non-public schools. We understand that they intend to restrict it in many ways, even further than EANS 1, and our hope and all of our efforts are being put into making sure that that does not occur. So,
and if you have time, please go on to the ed.gov website. In the Office of Non-Public Schools, you'll see the opportunity to comment on EANS 2. Please submit a comment. Talk about the needs of your schools and the need for EANS 2 to be less restrictive.
Right. And just to add on, if you have any connections whatsoever to your local politicians, which a lot of I'm sure a lot of administrators do, reach out to them, tell them what you think, tell them you want the EANS, and let them work for you. That's kind of their job. So again, grassroots efforts is really, really important. I don't think any of us could state enough how much a simple phone call sometimes just from a constituent could really tip that scale. So, and I'm sure Sarah and Dan have that experience as well. It really makes all the world of a difference. So if you could, and you feel you're sort of knowledgeable enough about the issue, reach out to whoever you can, and even have your parent body maybe reach out.
Absolutely. Okay, I see this question's been asked before, but I'll just reiterate. Will it pay for expenses occurring after July 15th? So not for reimbursements, but again, for services, that does count after July 15th, but we are waiting to get those contracts in so that you can actually receive those services. But July 15th is the cutoff date for reimbursements. I understood that Senator Schumer meant that you could have PPP and EANS, but you cannot have forgiveness on the PPP in such a case.
Maybe. I mean, that you could summarize it that way, but again, as of now, do not act on what Senator Schumer said, because it's not written anywhere, and until it is, no one's going, you can't, when you go to the state for reimbursement or for the PPP and say, no, but Senator Schumer said at the, at the webinar, they're not going to do much with it. Again, like Dan said, we do have him on record, so we could push him a little bit forward. And again, as we all know, he's a good friend for our communities, and therefore we could try to do what we can. But right now, just pretend like he never said it. I have no other way of saying it, right? Just, for now, and hopefully, if it works out, it works out. But you can't make any decisions now. Again, and you have a very short deadline, so you can't make any decisions now based on what he said until we have better clarity.
Yeah, I think Ami's advice is sound. I would not rely on what Senator Schumer said on the webinar for the purposes of filling out your application here. Can we buy tables and chairs for social? I think the answer is yes. I think it fits under the category of CDC and social distancing, and they're movable, so should be good to go. If we purchase additional, sorry.
I just want to add on. There is a sort of a question, like what we do think is good, but if they push back and say, okay, well, you have 300 students, you got 300 new desks, that's not really social distancing, that's just you getting new desks, right? They could do that. We don't think they will. We hope they won't, right? But in theory, if they do that, you would have to come with some type of COVID-related expense as to why the COVID germs were on the old desks. I'm not sure, but you'd have to come up with something to sort of justify that.
It's a fair point. If we purchase additional technology devices so people don't share devices, and we now need additional access points, can we apply for those access points?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
And we know that access points are mobile because we fought that fight in the SSBL, sorry, Smart Schools Bond Act. So yes, go for it.
Can we use this money for a summer tutoring/mentoring program if we claim it's to help students get up to par due to COVID? Do we have to use an approved tutoring service from a list of vendors, or can any individual tutor consider themselves self-employed and as their own vendor bill us?
I think this was asked and answered, and you would have to use a state contract. Those contracts don't exist as of yet. We don't know that they will be available for this summer. It's the best we can do.
Can we include rentals for copy machines or a lease?
So Tikva and I had this conversation yesterday. Thank you for asking it again, Tikva. My thought was that, especially since they leased another space, it goes back to needing more things in this new space. You can't just lease a building and put kids in it. You need things, and the copy machine is needed to make copies for kids for their work. So I thought it might work.
Right. I mean, you could argue that like in the past we had kids share papers, and now because of COVID, we have every student is being printed something separately, and something along those lines.
Well, in New York City, we did have schools purchase additional copy machines with their CARES Act funds because they were running off so many more packets to send home at certain times during this, pandemic year, that they needed more service, more machines. So even if it was you know, you have the machine now, but you needed it at a certain point. So could you pay for the lease throughout, like from March 13, 2020 through next school year?
Okay, next question. How do we show proof of payment for service or contract happening after July 15th? Well, right now you can't. So you just would put, as we'd instructed before, you just put in for the services that you're requesting. And then eventually when the contracts come out, you can then show proof of payment down the line.
No, if we're talking about services,
Right.
you're not going to have to show proof of payment
Oh, I
because the
see.
contracted vendor is going to
Is
provide
right.
the service, and the contracted vendor is going to bill the state. And you may have to sign off that the service actually took place.
Right.
But that's it.
Makes sense.
I mean, the best
Um,
model we have now for you to sort of envision it, and again, it's not going to be a perfect model, is something similar to the title services now. Hopefully better than that. That's what we're hoping for, something more expansive and something easier to use. But that's the basic idea. Yeah.
Is it possible to cover money for English studies? And if so, till when?
If you're talking about your own teachers, no,
Right.
not under EANS.
Yeah, and I don't know under anything really, but it's another story.
Well,
No, CARES.
No, I think
CARES,
with the
we're
CARES
working on
Act, you
that
could go
with New York City.
right. With the CARES Act, you could go through a third party. With the EANS, I mean, we had this discussion yesterday, Sarah. I think that the language is somewhat vague and there's room to advocate. We could try. You're right. On its face, it seems like it's not coverable like it is in CARES, but we're definitely going to try it. We're definitely going to ask and see what happens. It doesn't hurt to ask. Worst case scenario, they'll just look at you like you're crazy, but that's okay. We're used to that already.
Yeah. I don't envision NICEAD saying yes to this, but we definitely will ask.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to be proven wrong.
Is payroll considered reimbursement and must be done by July, or can it be considered service for next school year?
Payroll is not
Payroll is not.
allowed.
Correct. Smartboard installation, no, we already did that. How do we show proof of payment? All right, I already answered that. Better smartboards equals better visibility for all in-class students and when they are sitting further away than ever. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Is installation of internet or phone lines in classrooms to connect to students at home covered? Again, this goes back to the installation question.
Right. You could try, but very hard to know if they're going to cover things that are considered a service that's called installation. It's not a product, it's a service. So, but we can try. We'll ask. You guys can put it in. We'll see what happens.
Okay. And if it allows tutoring, mentoring in the summer, how can we get reimbursed for services after July 15th? Okay, we already answered this question. We had to purchase new smartboards for rooms that weren't used as classrooms before, but had to be used as classrooms this year due to social distancing needs, and then need to spread our students.
So I think this part
Definitely
is
allowable.
right. So I just want to say this part, I think the next few are when Dan said, if you guys think of any good ideas for the smartboard. So this is sort of going back to when he said that you had a bunch of messages relating to good claims for the smartboards, which, you know, if the Q&A does come out eventually, it's 144 messages. So I don't know who's putting that together, but I'm electing Dan. It's gonna be a lot of work, but
we're splitting it. We're splitting
right,
it.
we're splitting it. Okay, that's fair.
We'll see about that.
But you could put them all, you know, what we could put that all in the Q&A, sort of all the different suggestions if we feel it makes sense.
For sure. What about MERV 13 filters?
I thought yes, because they are just the filters, and they're what?
No, go ahead.
They're the filters for existing HVAC systems. They are what's the term they use for something that you use it once and, you know, it's done. It's
Disposable.
disposable. not yes, disposable, but there's a consumable. It's a consumable. So it doesn't go back to anybody. It's recommended by the CDC. I thought there's a good case for it.
Right. Okay. Include it if you have it. How can receiving PPP round 2? Okay, we already answered that. Okay, let me just keep scrolling here to clarify. We lease the modular classrooms. Eventually, we will have to remove them. Okay, it's good.
Oh, they were leased. If it was leased,
right.
I would think that's easy. Put it in under the lease.
Right, exactly. I have a direct message. Is fixing windows need to be a contract with the state?
Yes.
Yes. I have another MERV question. HVAC filters need to be changed every 3 months. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. Field trips, that's normally covered by New York City, but due to COVID, they didn't provide this. Currently, we needed to rent buses and pay for these buses. Would that be approved under transportation? I think so, yes. For field trips?
For field trips, when?
Well, right, if it's in the period, in the window.
Right, but that's it. This is a reimbursement. So you would have to be able to submit your proof of payment, your invoice and proof of payment by July 15th.
Right. Can we make a rental contract now for the next 18 months for space and get paid?
I don't know, because again, it's a reimbursement and you'd have to show proof of payment.
Well, a rental contract for what, right?
Space, more
for
space for
Mhm.
social
Oh, for
distancing.
space, I see.
I want to take a step back. Maybe I'm wrong. The CARES Act funding allowed for space rental as well? It did, didn't it?
Theoretically, yes, but I
Yeah.
don't believe anybody has been able to do it, because in New York City, everything has to be under contract.
Including the really including the space rental. That's ridiculous. But,
How are you going to get reimbursement? How is the city supposed to pay the school back?
right.
And this is
No, right. But in theory, that's what I'm saying. Right. I'm not talking about the reimbursement part. I'm saying, let's say for you have 18 months. So let's say you're going to get reimbursed for the first, I don't know, 8 months. For those last 10 months, in theory, you could use your CARES funds to pay for that. Spend,
yeah, but in a big theory.
Right. It's work, but in, you know,
I can't listen, you know, Nama and I think do most of the work there, and you know, everybody certainly plays a very strong advocacy role, but I don't see, I don't know how that would happen. I just don't know.
Listen, admittedly, you are the expert in contracts, absolutely, and if it's impractical, essentially, okay, but let's, you know, I guess we could always bring it up with our DOE friends and see how
we'll bring it up, but we still don't have a contract with their you know, sanitation supply people. So as an example of something that a contract exists for.
Right. Okay. How soon after we send this application in do we receive the money?
Their deadline to pay you for items that are reimbursable at the moment is August 23rd. There is an option for the state to tell the feds that in good faith, they have implemented the program, but they have not been able to get through everything yet. And could they have an extension? And the feds have said that they will grant those extensions. So it is unclear when those payments will be made.
Right.
I think it will be on a rolling the truth is I shouldn't even say that. I don't know if it will be on a rolling basis as things get approved, or if they wait until they can like do a big bulk payment. Ami and Dan, do you have more experience with that? I mean, like if it's going to follow the non-public school NPSC security equipment grant, then that's a rolling payment. As things come in, as they get approved, payment goes out to individual schools.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have clarity on this
Right,
yet.
you can't say for sure. I mean, personally, it's one of those things, put it in and just pray, I guess. And hopefully it'll come in on time.
It may take a little while.
Yeah. There's a question about a lease after July 15th for space.
Oh, right. So that's what we were just talking
Right.
about. I don't know. You know, theoretically, they should be allowed to, you know, could the state say it's an encumbrance to this school by August 23rd, and they will pay out through June 30th as proof of payment comes in. But remember, usually the state only cuts one check per program per year for a school. So you might get paid to where you are today. And then again, at the end of next school year, we could bring it back, but I don't know. Does anybody have a better answer than that? It could be considered an encumbrance to the school is what I'm thinking.
Okay, what about professional development?
That is part of the services.
Right, exactly. That's part of the services. Okay, IT or phone service, we answered. Okay. Till when can contracted items need to be completed? So what's the drop dead date for contracted items?
Well, that's a tough one. August 23rd is the date that everything's supposed to be encumbered by. But again, if the state is making good faith effort, the feds will give them an extension. We are working as hard as possible with them. They want to implement this as quickly as possible. Those of you who know Christina know that she really is a good friend and is really, you know, trying to help us. And they're working really hard. That's part of why they brought Capital BOCES on board, because they think that they can do some of this quicker through Capital BOCES rather than, you know, just with their own department. So no firm answer on that other than it all has to be paid out by June 30th. We're, you know, we wanted to see those contracts happen as soon as possible so that students can be helped as soon as possible.
Right. Okay, I think we have reached our time here. So I wanted to thank you all for joining and for your great questions. We have some things that we're going to try to clarify, but in the meantime, you should all just be, you know, plowing ahead and making sure that you're getting your applications in on time. I wanted to thank my colleagues, Ami and Sarah, for your tremendous support and for your expertise. It's great to be doing these kind of joint programs together, and I'm sure we'll be doing many more of them in the future. We look forward to answering more of your questions and getting you an FAQ as soon as we possibly can. So thank you again, and everyone have a great weekend and a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
And special thank you to Dan for putting this all together. Thank you, Dan. And
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye.